Great, thank you. Thank you so much. And another example of really powerful storytelling and thought leadership can be seen in a Stat News article that was co-written by Dr. William Vega and Dr. David Satcher about the growing impact of Alzheimer's on communities of color. So two communities coming together. We have copies of that outside, so please make sure to grab one. With that, I'd love to bring up our next panel to talk a little bit about the opportunity that technology presents us to do a better job of reaching out to communities and to understand and start to address health disparities. So to moderate this conversation, I want to bring up Sarah Hoyt. Sarah is a career social entrepreneur focused on companies that impact larger social issues. She co-founded Connected Living in 2007 to provide families and communities with a private social network to bridge the digital divide for seniors. And we're very grateful to Sarah's leadership and to Connected Living's leadership throughout the summit as one of our corporate chairs. So very grateful to Sarah and welcome her to the stage. Nihal is running late.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. I have been looking forward to these couple days, actually for many months, as I know many in this room have. I think it's nice to be able to take a few days and really focus on something that profoundly affects all of us, that we all care passionately about. This room is filled with some of my favorite people who I've had the pleasure to work with both in the public and private sectors. I look around and I see people with Dementia Friendly America, Dementia Friends, amazing corporate partners in senior living like Rita, who's one of our real champions with all that is happening with this disease, George Vradenberg, who's a friend to everybody and so passionate, so courageous in trying to combat this disease. I come at this very personally and I come at this professionally. I've been in our family, watched my grandmother go from the most powerful and vocal and biggest change agent I knew in my life to someone who called unable to find her car in a parking lot where we knew it had been too long and in the end didn't know who we were. On my husband's side, his family has been plagued with early onset, and we know what that means. So this is deeply personal. From a company standpoint, and I am so excited for this panel. I cannot wait to hear what all my colleagues have to say. We at Connected Living have been trying for a decade to bring a voice and bring tools to over 20 million people in this country who've been left out of the conversation and behind the digital divide. We can connect families, we can connect communities, we can empower people, we can give them voice, as my panel is going to tell you. That's what we've been working on for 10 years. And so I am absolutely thrilled, George, to have been invited to be your partner and to work with all of you on this critical issue. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce the panel. They're each going to give a brief presentation on their technologies and solutions, and then we're going to get right into a dialogue. First off, I would like to introduce Dr. Shea to come up. Madeline Shea is the Deputy Director of the Office of Minority Health at the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, where she's working to reduce disparities in the quality and outcomes of Medicare and Medicaid coverage. Thank you so much for being here. Next, I have Viz. Viz is the Chief Ed, Tech, and Global Officer of Cell Ed and playing a leadership role in developing and implementing a strategy to take and use mobile phones for learning globally. Can't wait to hear what you're doing. Jack Harrison Quintana is a Latino activist, author, researcher, and currently serving as the Director of Gender for Equality. His work at the intersection of digital activism and LGBTQ justice has earned him recognition as one of Foreign Policy Magazine's top geopolitical thinkers in 2016. Welcome. And Nihal is a social entrepreneur, biomedical researcher, and leading millennial Alzheimer's advocate. It's so exciting to see the youth getting involved in this movement. So great to see you. In 2015, he realized that Alzheimer's disease is one of the largest impending healthcare crises, and noticing the lack of youth advocacy, got involved himself. So welcome and thank you. I know that each of my panelists have a presentation. I'm going to guess that it goes in the order that I introduced in terms of who has the PowerPoints. So I will go ahead and start with you, Dr. Shea.
Does this, okay. Actually, I don't have any PowerPoint, so we're good for that. But you should look for, I did bring some of these cards that will give you information about how to get to this Mapping Medicare Disparities tool that my office created, because one of the problems that we've had is people don't really even understand in local communities what their health disparities are. And the tool has 27 different chronic conditions, but you can look at the differences in each county of the country by race and ethnicity, or people who are dually eligible for Medicare and Medicaid, or by gender, to see what's going on, and then trends over time. This tool's kind of new, and you can look at Alzheimer's and other dementia-related costs, 3 different ways of showing costs, hospitalizations, and prevalence. Those are the measures you can see. I was looking at it, and everything looked pretty flat. A few years ago, 2011, I worked with the Maryland Department of Health on creating performance metrics to see how our state and all the counties were doing over time. We set goals. And we came up with the measures we thought that were important. And the Alzheimer's community came out and really banged the door down. You better have a measure on this, or else, basically. Huge advocacy. We did end up with a measure. That one was on hospitalizations. It was the only one where we had good data at the time at the county level and by race and ethnicity. So as I was preparing for today, I thought, let me go back and see what happened there. And I was really stunned to see, and this is coming back to what you said, George, about having goals and then being able to measure your progress. So I went back and I was really stunned. You won't be able to see this. These huge decreases that you can see if you were to look at Maryland State Health Improvement Process. We've got a bunch of metrics. Huge decreases, particularly among African Americans across counties, but also whites. Latinos was lower to begin with, and so it's a little bit more bouncy and lower rates. So I got on the phone with the people that insisted that that measure be part of our report card for the state. What is going on here? We never see decreases like this in any measure, really. In fact, I looked at every other one thinking someone made a mistake. It was not a mistake. So this is just a long way of saying that I do really think it is critical that we always have metrics to set goals, especially equity goals, where you do have differences in a health condition, and to be able to measure your progress over time. There's an exciting story. They have theories, but it's kind of reinvigorated people in Maryland around what's going on there, and then what the new metrics need to be for the future, because we've seen such changes in where care happens. That's really the story that we think is going up, partially going on with the huge decrease in hospitalizations. We have a lot more people in their homes and communities, which is a good thing, but it also points to new needs for supports.
Thank you very much. I think Viz does have a visual.
I do, and thank you, Sarah. And thank you very much for having me, inviting me to this amazing morning for me, certainly. I've learned a hell of a lot over the past few hours, so I feel appreciated that it's been a great learning experience for me. So I do, and I'm from Salad. If you can go to the next slide and the video that goes with that, please. And let's just play the video, and then I'll talk to it. Thank you.
Great.
all live longer, which is an amazing thing, but what that means is we need a larger number of caregivers to take care of us as we stay in our homes. Long-term care workers are majority women, majority coming from immigrant backgrounds, around between 40 and 50 years of age. We have a lot of workers who have English as their second language, and so there's limited language proficiency. And most of the workers, because they're low-wage jobs, work 2 jobs. They have kids, they have parents they need to take care of, and so time is really something that they take as a premium. What we've seen with the workers is that by preparing them with a basic set of skills, it really helps them advance in the workplace. Taking CEL-Ed courses allows them that access point to be able to learn English and take that next step to become a certified nurse assistant.
CEL-Ed is an innovative learning model that allows members to learn a language through texting and calling anytime, anywhere.
La forma facilísima. Llevo un maestro conmigo a todos lados y en mi tiempo libre lo prendo y es todo.
Lo que más me gusta es que es a mi tiempo. No tengo una presión de horario.
The course is really designed for someone to learn how to speak in English. It's not meant to teach you how to conjugate verbs, but it's really meant for you to learn scenarios that you can incorporate into your professional and everyday life, such as providing customer service, or registering for a school, or applying for a job.
All you need is a cell phone. And so even if you don't have computer skills, you have the ability to pick up your phone and text, and you can still increase your proficiency in English.
After using this program and successfully going through several of the modules, they have had this boost of confidence.
Before, I'm afraid, when I have to go to some office, they don't have somebody speak Spanish, and I can do by English.
He visto muchos cambios en mí, más confianza. Ya no le digo a mis hijos que me acompañen a la tienda para que me interpreten.
I see the impact of education, whether it's learning a language or learning how to use the computer. We see how much that just brings like a light to their face. They all of a sudden start thinking about the future, 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. What is it that they can do? What are other opportunities out there that maybe they didn't know about?
Con esta clase yo siempre me limitaba por mi inglés. Yo decía, es que no puedo porque no sé inglés. Ahora como me siento más confiada y sé que estoy aprendiendo día a día, yo voy a seguir, no nomás al colegio, hasta donde pueda, para que mi familia sea más orgulloso de mí.
This was a video that was done by Digital Promise and used CEL-Ed as an illustration of an innovation using mobile phones, but interestingly using mobile phones that are entry-level or basic and feature and smartphones. So no matter what kind of phone you have, the access to courses through text and voice is there. So it talks to some of the barriers that we heard about this morning. It talks to some of the challenges that learners potentially have, or people who want to use this form of learning potentially have in terms of time, in terms of access, and we address this. And the way we do it is really to be able to provide the ability to use the phone to train, to engage, and to track. If we can go to the next slide, please. And if we think about what works, it's really about 24/7 access. It's about the learner deciding when she or he will have access or will have time, whether it's while they're in transit or whether after the kids are gone to bed, but when it's their choice around when they will start to learn, when they will have time. The next is self-directed. So it's part of empowering the learner to decide what courses, when they will take it, how they will take it, what form factor, what device they will use. It's about micro lessons. We heard about the telenovela, the short versions, and that's exactly what we do. All our courses are designed in what we call micro lessons, 3 minutes plus minus. The intention is to have that kind of competence or part competence to be done within the 3-minute micro lesson. we talk to real scenarios. So the way we structure the micro lessons is with real scenarios which we co-create with partners. And the partners become an important part of how we deliver this, because the partners have the trust, which is a lot of what we heard of this morning. And we don't have that trust. We don't have that level of engagement. So the partnerships with organizations in communities become critical, both in terms of engaging with potential learners, but also in terms of co-creating the content with us. And lastly, we look at where required the potential to provide live coaching, someone you can reach out to via text, via voice, someone to help you overcome a hiccup. And our ability to do that is critical to the success of the learners progressing through and achieving their learning outcomes that they want to achieve. Can we go to the last slide, please? I'll just leave the slide up. Just a couple of comments around what are the key features that seem to delight our clients or our customers through whom we engage with a range of learners. I'll stop this here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jack, if you could talk about how your platform is addressing disparities in health issues. I know you've done a lot of work with that.
Sure. It's so great to be here. I probably should start with talking about what our platform is a little bit. I am coming from Grindr, the largest gay dating app in the world. I'm curious how many people have heard of it. If you could. Okay, most people. Well, for anyone who doesn't know, we are the largest gay dating app in the world, and as a result, we are the largest network of gay, bisexual, and transgender people in the world. If you're curious, the second largest network is the MCC Church, which is a network of LGBT accepting churches. I know we've talked a lot today about outreach through churches, and that's another thing I think we can bring into the room. But my app is, let's see, what do I want to say about it? It's widely used, and that's what makes it such a good tool for health outreach. We have 2 million users a day and 3.5 million unique users every month in 197 countries. And so as a result, I basically have this just treasure trove of data about my community. I know where they are, I know who they are in terms of age, race, a few other things like whether they're trans. And I use that in my position with Grindr for Equality to do the kinds of health outreach that we've been talking about today. But what I think is particularly cool is that because of all this data, we're able to achieve scale of our messages without sacrificing tailoring. So when I think about putting racial justice at the heart of our outreach, we're really able to do messages to Black gay men, to Latinos, to Asian Americans, and even to American Indians. We've had actually a very successful collaboration with the Navajo Nation to do native outreach in the Southwest. And so we're really thinking about all of these sort of factors. And we're kind of at the beginning of our journey of applying this to brain health. I definitely want to thank Jason and Us Against Alzheimer's for pushing us to start our work in that area. A lot of what we've done in the past has been around sexual health, which I think makes a lot of sense for our community. And we at Grindr are really committed to making sure that that's not the only thing that we're addressing, because we know that lesbian, gay, bisexual, and trans people are impacted by all kinds of health issues, not just HIV and not just sexual health. And I think that, you know, when Joyce talked earlier about meeting people where they are, going to clubs to do outreach, that's really what my job is about, right? That we have these folks who are a captive audience in some ways and who are on our app all the time. And, you know, my job is to figure out all the ways to take advantage of that for health and human rights. So I would say that is my short explanation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Nihal, I know you've had a really unique position in this community of really reaching out to the millennials and younger people to get involved, and I'd love to hear really love to hear what you're working on. All of our technologies have been multi-generational. One of our first lenses is, would a 14-year-old, a 50-year-old, and an 80-year-old enjoy this? How could we bring a private community together? That's what we've been working on for 10 years, and I know you're really bringing the youth into this, so I'm excited to hear what you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me again. It's great to see so many familiar faces from last year. So the program we're working on is not tech-focused in and of itself, and the technology platform that we're creating is there to supplant the program. So the program is a social enterprise caregiving respite program where undergraduate or graduate students would be trained on how to work with early stage with folks who have early stage dementia or MCI, and provide some time off for their unpaid family caregivers. So we've run this as a grant-funded model for the past 2 years, offering it for free to the LA community, and we've used the numbers from that to prove that there is a market for this. This is in very high demand, and that students are gaining a higher number, or more students are gaining interest in areas of aging because of this. So the social enterprise we've developed is called Youth Care. And because we're using trained student volunteers and partnering them with these early stage folks who have early stage dementia, we're able to offer this at a much lower cost than your traditional in-home caregiver or other caregiving options that are out there. So what we're looking to do in these next few months is we're applying to a few different pitch competitions, things like that, get the startup funding, and looking at a few different universities in the LA area for a pilot location. But what our grant-funded model has shown us is that with just 6 hours a week, which is what the students would be providing of this caregiver respite, we're able to see that 73% of caregivers have said this is enough stress relief for them for the week, and 87% have said that this is a very significant stress relief. From the student side, 100% of our students, and we've paired over 100 students and seniors together, have said that they would recommend this to a friend. So unless they have friends that they really hate, they actually like this program. So we're really excited about building this intergenerational bridge, which also has the potential to lower the burden on Medicaid, allow several more low-income folks who might have a financial inability to get these kind of services to now enter the market. Our technology is an app that has a student profile and has a senior profile, and we would pair these students and seniors based on similar career interests and hobbies. So this has been great because we've seen obviously UCLA has a lot of smart people, and we've seen one of the original discoverers of estrogen be paired with my friend who's a neuroscience major, and they just talk about research for 3 hours. And so the app would allow us to get rid of the administrative costs that we have, and although we're looking to initially charge around $15 for this program, once we develop the app and get this program to scale, we foresee this program sub $10 per hour. And so that's a little bit about what we're doing.
Exciting, thank you. I'd like to open this back up. Dr. Shea, I want to ask you, in the work that we have done, and we serve thousands of seniors and families across the country. Many of our seniors are in senior living, memory care, and many are in their homes. We've seen how profoundly the disconnection, the broken family, distance, broken community is affecting, particularly as you feel like you're losing other pieces of yourself. How have you seen isolation and sort of family disconnection affecting what's happening in the States, and what do you think can be done about it as you're looking from a technology perspective? We've seen a number of interesting interventions, but I just really feel like that's one of the big issues we're all grappling with, is that isolation.
So I would say that coming back, so not so much for this map, because we can't, there is a problem in terms of data to show social, there really isn't, but I will say that we don't have a history of collecting the right information about social isolation. If you look at any survey, it'll say, what's your marital status? Which really has absolutely no bearing a lot of times on really what is important is, are you isolated?
Right.
Do you have someone you can call on? So we're definitely doing what we can to try to change that, and being that voice at the table, that this is very, very important, because this all ultimately can end up with payment. If we understand where things fall down, then you're starting to build a case for payment for Medicare or Medicaid. So that was not a very good answer. But I will tell you, going back to What happened in Maryland, and when I looked at that map and went back and asked them what was happening, so much of their work and focus, and I can only speak to that, has been on caregiver support. They feel like that has been important, particularly as care has shifted more into homes, and that there's just a lot of work going on there and supports for that.
I think this is, and clearly we're not going to have time in this short panel, but I think what you do and what everyone in this room needs is the data to be able to affect funding and change. And I ask us all, because when people say to me all the time, well, people can't get connected, or it's an aging population, they're not going to, and I said that's wrong. Because either you bring people something they want to connect to, and you can have the data, and you can have conversation, you can have voice, or if you're at the point in your journey where you can't, your caregiver certainly can. So there's no reason we can't have the data. There's no reason we can't have the socialization and the story and all those pieces. So again, what you're doing is so important, and I think all of us are starved for the data and want to work on that so that we can affect the money and the changes we need to.
So the comment I'm about to make is not on behalf of my current job, just be very clear, as a federal employee. But when I looked at this, and what happened in Maryland immediately, largely because of where I do work now, was, well, there's huge savings to hospitals. This is profound. And have we had the commensurate investment in the supports that we'd need in home and communities? So I'm not saying that, again, as in my current job, but more as a public health
Yes.
and equity person.
Thank you. Nihal, I want to just for a moment address another question to you about we have certainly found in our work that the power of the intergenerational connection, the ability for the youth to be patient and fun and empowered and just exactly what's needed in this situation, and tech savvy, because they are connected, we have found huge benefit in that. Tell me a little bit more about what you have already seen and ways that you think others can sort of benefit from the program that you are doing with the youth and the seniors.
Yeah, absolutely. So just to address a few different points here, I think social isolation is one of the things we're trying to address. Our program does take place in a community center with several of these pairs, so we do have intermittent group activities as well. And I think, what our organization's doing is trying to be as holistic as possible. While our focus is getting this off the ground, we do have several other projects to gather more data about the youth. One of the projects we're working on right now is partnering with the Los Angeles Unified School District and looking at a few different high schools to see how many high schoolers are actually the caregivers for their grandmothers and grandparents. And especially in low-income families, we can see that if you have two parents working a job, like who else is going to provide care? And that can lead to truancy and lower academic rates, and it's a vicious cycle. And so I think there are different ways to look at this. And then from a youth perspective, I think that we're a little bit less fazed by the realities of the world, so to speak. We're definitely younger and have more energy. And I think just having a mentor, too, is something that a lot of young people look for. And we do see that in a lot of our partners and buddies.
Great. If I could also, Viz and Jack, I think you both, there's two very different things going on here. One, we do have language barriers all over this country, and we have many care workers who don't speak the native language. And what have you seen in terms of the technology adoption with partners that you work with, willingness for in-home care or others to sort of provide those technologies? Because clearly, changing the dynamic and the ability to fully communicate is really important. And I guess as we sort of play off of this, you affect so many people in your network. And the power of technology is so exciting that way, because what we can all say to each other, the simple messages, the normalization of this conversation, where everyone in this room has faced the situation where people don't want to talk about it or afraid to say that they have the disease. Maybe the two of you for a moment can just talk about there's some unique opportunities to bridge gaps here.
Sure. Thanks. Well, I think for us the interesting connecting point is around language and work-based skills, and the ability to build a language competency that's so needed in many of our jobs. To be able to do that in a particular context of a work. And in this example, we talked about the need for learning English and to be better able to communicate both in terms of the English language, but also in terms of numeracy. And link that to home care, for example, or in other kinds of career or other kinds of economic sectors. And that connection was very important because you're understanding and building a set of language competencies in the context of your work and as a starting point. And we found that to be very powerful in terms of bridging that gap and helping you build a set of what we describe as essential skills, skills that one needs to communicate, be able to function better in a work and social environment. And so being able to do that in the healthcare environment is certainly one example of where we found it could be quite powerful.
So for me, thinking about the language question, it's actually one of the big advantages that we have in the platform is that we are able to, one way that we're able to tailor the messages that we're sending out is based on what language your phone is set to. So if you are a smartphone user who uses your phone in Spanish, when you receive messages from me, they will be in Spanish. If they're in Korean, then you'll get them in Korean. And I know that not every platform necessarily has that capability, but I do think that that's really been something that has helped us see really good results. And I think that I'm sure many people in here are developing new tools. These are the kinds of things that we can build into our tools that will really help us to reach people. What was your second question?
No, that was perfect. I would like to be able to open this up. I know that we have a couple things we want to do, actually looking at the technology. But the first thing I want to also offer up and say to people that I promised I would do, we just released an app ourselves, Connected Living, which is free. And it is about private family and private community connection. We actually all need to be talking. And in fact, the language translation is powerful because we have big international coalitions going on trying to solve this epidemic. But what's interesting, and you guys have literature on this too, while connecting is free, we have location, families can privately connect, communities can connect, any goods or services that people need off of the app, transportation, food, concierge, there's money going back to USA too. So I think we have the ability to coalesce and connect and do things, and the translation is critical. What we wanted to do, and Jason has nicely put up here for us, anyone who wants to take advantage of the free app can with Connected Living and put in the USA2 code, because then any of those profits will go back, if there are any, to the USA2. But also we want you to put in this text and let us know, do you currently use technology solutions in your outreach and engagement work, text messages, social media apps, et cetera, so that Jason can have this information and we can use it in the future. But if everyone would do that, I do want to open this up to questions from the group.
So it looks like 100%. And I'll just start off the questions for Jack. Jack, can you tell us a little bit more about your emerging partnership with Us Against Alzheimer's?
Sure. Well, I'm very excited about it. Like I said, a lot of our history has been in sexual health, and we really want to expand that. We're looking at some cancers and also brain health as the first ways that we're going to do that. And so the two main things that I think that we want to do with Us Against Alzheimer's is to take advantage of our network to do some research on lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people and Alzheimer's. I personally have a suspicion that we are disproportionately caregivers in our community, so I think we want to find that out and also target our messages by age to hear more from LGBT seniors about their experiences. And then, on the other side, to distribute resources that are culturally competent to various LGBT racial groups and just use the app as a platform of communication to make sure that our people know what resources are out there and can get involved in our movement.
Great. First question was back here, the woman in blue and black.
Thank you. Jack, my name is Jackie. I'm from Alzheimer's Orange County, and in Orange County we have a lot of our seniors, unfortunately, are going back into the closet as they age. How has this app allowed you to help break this communication barrier so that our seniors can get the care and treatment that they deserve?
You know, I think that is a really important thing that's going on broadly with LGBT seniors. We also see it in terms of sexual health, that as people stop talking about their identity, they also are not accessing the things they need to be protecting themselves. And we have an HIV epidemic in the senior community as well. You know, can I say that I have had an impact on that yet? I don't think so, but I think that we do have a tremendous opportunity to reduce isolation of LGBT seniors through the app. And I think that as people are connected to other members in their community, I think that we can slow or stop that process of people going back in the closet.
In regards to your statement about disparity in terms of being caregivers as part of the LGBT community, I myself had 3 brothers, and I'm a gay man, and I'm the only one that took care of my mother. And the statement was, well, you're not really in a valid relationship, so you have the time to do it. And quite often that is put on us as gay people within our family system. And then the other thing is that when you have a partner who, for whatever reason, you may have to put in a care facility, they're not equipped to deal with the issues because there's a lot of discrimination still within, and especially I'm going to point fingers at the black community around gay issues. So you have a partner in a facility and that staff does not treat you or your partner at all with dignity.
I think that's right. I think another thing that comes to my mind about our unique needs as we age is around trans people and brain health and making sure that caregivers who may be in caregivers who are not necessarily family members, whether they're nurses or in facilities, are equipped to respect people's gender identity as they articulate it, even you know, as they may be not communicating as well as they did in the past.
I saw a few other hands.
Questions? Oh, then with that, I'll take a privilege and direct a question to Dr. Shea. How can practitioners in the room and researchers, do you have recommendations for how we might leverage something like the health disparities map in our work, in our outreach work, in our targeting work? How do you think that we can leverage the data that you've collected in those processes?
I mean, being able to look at local data always is helpful for when you're bringing a case for either getting money or partnerships, a voice. So the reason why other than being very forceful, that the Maryland chapter of the Alzheimer's Association got that measure, and our really limited number of measures for all of health for the state was they were able to say it is a bigger leading cause of death than diabetes. You know, so it was that data argument. Having data is always important, I think, when you have it. So you can, our tool is, if you were just to look up mapping Medicare disparities, you'll find ours, it'll pop up. But look at your local data also. You know, leading cause of death is an important one for really having your voice be respected at the table.
You know, I think that a number of people around this room are trying to do studies right now to continue to bring the power of what connection and technology and bringing people together can do around this disease. We have seen very profoundly in our work when someone is connected, the ability for them to you know, access what they need, feel empowered, not give up, take some of the medications that they need, and just have that social piece of it where so often they feel like they have been abandoned, and not only are they losing who they are, but they're losing their families, and the families don't know how to talk to them at a certain point. And so we have found the technology to be so powerful, but I think that you need to be able to have that kind of data for people to see that's decreasing health costs, it's increasing caregivers' ability to take care of people. It's changing the worker's experience when you can walk into the room. If you had known that my grandmother loved Frank Sinatra, you could have completely changed your visit to her, even though she didn't know who you were. The room would have been completely different and she would have been singing. These are all the things that we can so easily do through knowing who someone is and what they love and where they came from and who they've always been. And so I do feel like the power of, you know, connecting the dots and having the research is really important. I guess I would also love to hear not just questions but thoughts from the room. You know, one of the powers of technology, and as I sat here and listened to the panelists, we can all be working together. There's things called APIs, so your translation and your matching up of the seniors with the youth and my private network. I'd love to hear some other things that other people are doing, if anyone else wants to share out here in the audience.
And we have a question right here from Deborah Jones.
Oh, good.
Sorry, actually it's two questions.
Yes.
One question is in relation to Cell Ed, and I'm just curious about keeping the person engaged with the education, and I noticed that you all have the live coaching, and I don't know if the live coaching in part is to keep them on track with the educational program. So that's one question. The second question is for Jack. I'm really fascinated by some of the work that's happening in technology around passive data collection to gauge people's moods, or if they're dealing with depression, social isolation, based on the level of activity on the device that they're using. And so I just think that there's a lot of potential there, particularly in Alzheimer's and other mental health areas. So wanted to just ask those two.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. You're raising what in the field of open and distant learning has always been the challenge, is how do you keep learners engaged, especially when you're at a distance and you're not meeting your fellow students or peers, and it's easy enough to switch off. So that is a challenge. And there's a couple of ways we look to address it. One of the ways is to make sure that the courses are very contextual, so very relevant to the need, very relevant to the things that the learner can actually engage with or identify with. And hence the comment around working with partners around making sure we co-create the content of the course in a way that makes sense to a learner. And the identification of the learner, what kind of she or he, what their needs are, and what levels it is, etc., all part of that mix of understanding the learner. So that's one. The second component is the coaching, and that's an important component just in terms of we know that often when we're learning at a distance, and mobile learning is part of that distance learning model, we know we hit blocks. You know, I'm currently doing a course, for example, and every so often I have to remind myself, why am I doing this? Or, you know, I could easily switch off and do something else, you know. So I think it's important to have somebody to go to, whether it's the kind of mentor model that we heard of now, or something like that. So for us, the coaches serve that purpose, to be able to, you know, unblock something for you. Often we're also tracking all the learners, and we know that if a learner is registered and she or he has not been on the course for, let's say, a day or 5 days, and we can track in a way that says after 5 days you get an SMS back to say, hey, we noticed you've not been on the course, you know, what's going on, can we help you, or something like that. After 7 days, 10 days, we can actually put a flag in place where, you know, a coach will call you. So you get to speak to somebody live, you know, and so suddenly you feel connected with somebody that says, hey, you know what, we know you are on this course, we know you may be struggling, what's going on, let's see how we can help you overcome that. So that is the other part. The third part is to just make sure that in the way we structure the courses, the micro lessons, so it's short bits, so that, you know, you don't need to be at a lesson or a class for an hour, for example. You can do it in 3-minute chunks, you know, you've got a bit of time here. So we make it as convenient as possible to the learner to help him or her overcome any of those barriers that are in place.
I am also very interested in the passive data collection piece. I would say that we're in the very beginning of our process around that. And I guess the question that is really just being raised internally at Grindr is this question of privacy versus the data. And I think that we will find a way forward, and that's just sort of where we are with it at the moment. Yeah.
I think that's always the key in technology, is what are people doing with what they know. I know we've spent hours on that because we're not going to share it with the broader public, but if it can help a partner if it can help us against Alzheimer's and figuring out how to better serve someone, you can share the data. And I think that's a really important piece of it. But obviously with technology, we know everything someone touches. We know what they're looking for, which buttons were the most helpful, where they come from, how many times they're connecting. All of those things are really powerful. I mean, we had an amazing example, one of the hundreds of places who told us that it wasn't going to work and that people wouldn't connect and why are you even trying? And we had taken 23 people in a memory care, highly assisted building who weren't coming out of their rooms, weren't dressing, weren't showering, and we gave them tablets, connection, a t-shirt, and they were logging in 8 to 9 times a day, and they were dressing, and they were showering, and they were walking with a purpose, and none of them visited the hospital for the 90 days of the study. And I'm looking around, I'm saying, that was a $500 piece of equipment. Actually, it was a lot less than $500. It was actually not a very good piece of equipment that was being given away. And yet just that feeling that they mattered, that they had a voice. Now, one woman wouldn't take her t-shirt off because she felt like she was part of something, so we gave her multiple t-shirts. And one was sleeping with her tablet, which, because her family was there, her grandkids were there. But it is not as hard as we all make it to find that connection, and you can bring people together. So we must do this, and the one thing that I will say, having been at this for a decade, is don't let anyone tell you they won't connect, and don't give up on people, because this whole idea of respect and treating people with a disease who are older differently, they're not dead. They're living, they have a voice, they have a family, they have so much to share, and technology is one of our ways of doing that, and the kids are all on it. So that's the match made in heaven.
We have 2 more questions. Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say if there's anything else you guys want to say before we go, but if we have time for 2 more questions, let's do it.
So Ganesh from WashU again. I want to just briefly comment, I think, on the privacy aspect. So we do a lot of driving research at WashU, and one of our biggest challenges, short of bringing our participants to the School of Medicine, is putting them in a car, taking them out on a road with a driving instructor, and then driving them through this controlled course. Some of them might not be up to that drive, and the safety of themselves and the instructors put at risk. We've developed a chip that we plug into their car, taken from the insurance industry over the past 3 years, and we've been fortunate to be funded by the Alzheimer's Association and the NIA. And so we plug the chip in, and it collects this data continuously over the course of however many years they allow us to let it be plugged in. But then you wonder, well, is this going to be hacked? Can this be used if I get into an accident by law enforcement? And you can actually apply for something called a certificate of confidentiality for your trials. And we actually took probably about a month to get it, and we're able to safeguard that data. But in terms of passive data collection, it's out there, the technology is out there, and they're using the technology, but it's just employing it in a way that's easy for researcher and for the participants or the patients.
Is there a final question?
Yes, we have one final question from Marita.
Yeah, I think that program that connects the students with the people is great, and I'm particularly excited that you said that the students find their lives enhanced. Now my question is, how does that information get out, that is to other students, to the general public, so that we increase the awareness and consciousness that Alzheimer's is not something we need to be sequestered from, but that it's something that engaging with that person can actually enhance their lives. Because often I'll tell people when I do presentations that if you have a family that won't help you, ask your friend. And your best friend will be there for you. And when I spoke in Brooklyn recently, a young girl, she couldn't have been more than 25, she said, I'm so glad you said that because my best friend asked me to help her with her mother who has dementia. And you know what? It was a great experience. So how do you let people know about this great thing that these young people are discovering?
Yeah, so we started actually as an advocacy organization 2 years ago, and we've been getting college and high school students to look at Alzheimer's, not only as an old person's, or not as the traditional old person's disease, but rather as America's #1 public health crisis in terms of how expensive it is, in terms of how much the costs are going to grow with baby boomer generations coming to age. And, I want my health care when I'm in my early 30s, to be completely honest. And so And so that's really what we've been sharing with people, and people have kind of caught on to this being, what I really like about my generation, I think, is like the trend is we're pretty forward thinking. We're trying to address issues which, like climate change, which haven't necessarily affected us right now, but will affect us in the future. And I think this fits right into that category. In terms of connectedness, I think this, one of the other data points which we collected through entrance and exit surveys is how much does this program increase interest in aging? And we've proven that in a Likert scale that there is a significant increase in interest in aging. So I think it's also preparing students for the aging population.
Okay, in the interest of time, why don't we just go one more time down the row, and anything that you forgot to say or wanted to say that you didn't, parting words.
I'm glad that you really hit on social isolation and all these solutions about that. I participated in an expert group on how we should assess the biggest risks for people like coming back to the hospital. And people who were front lines, like in Kaiser and California and all over the country, said that even though we don't measure it, the #1 predictor is social isolation. So I'm really happy about the work going on here about that.
Thanks. I suppose just 2 quick points. One is around the use of apps. We certainly do not discount apps because we recognize that more and more people are going to move to smartphones. They can have access to data, and those won't be prohibitive. And so we do have apps that are built around what we do for an entry-level or feature phone. So just to clarify that. The second component is around data and the ability to visualize that in a dashboard form for the partners, so that you could track individual learners as well as cohorts and look at trends and know exactly who's doing what across the courses and where there's hiccups. So we provide an immediate red flag that can be corrected fairly quickly.
I think the thing that I would leave everyone with is just, as a gay Mexican American, I'm so glad that we're having this conversation about racial disparities. And I would just ask that everyone in here, as you do your work, also think about sexual orientation and gender identity as another way that people of color are impacted in a specific way by the disease and by all health issues. Thank you.
So I actually want to end with a question. So how many of you in this room know a single coding language? Java or C++? Can you just get like a raise of hands? So maybe 10%. And I think that's really, an issue. We're leading, the people in this room are leading the solutions for long-term care, for aging, for Alzheimer's. And we need to be thinking of 21st century solutions. And with the growing sectors of artificial intelligence, virtual reality, we're entering a completely different world. And I think by even learning some basic coding classes, which are completely free now, you just start thinking in a very different perspective. And I would encourage you all to do that.
George has something he'd like to share.
No, I thought this panel was really terrific. But I think we're only on the verge of what is going to be happening in this world. Recent discoveries out of the Framingham study demonstrate that voice impairments through time are a great predictor of cognitive decline. So Siri and Alexa and all of the devices in your home that capture your voice can be a potential measure of what your cognitive health is. The mention of the automobile industry, we've been visited recently by Daimler Chrysler, the Mercedes-Benz manufacturer, about the use of autonomous cars to eliminate the fear of losing your keys, and beginning to experiment potentially with major senior living centers in trying out some limited capability with autonomous cars to actually transport people from senior living facilities to the homes of their families. So I think that we are just beginning to see the impact of new technologies, whether it be data-driven technologies, whether it would be the devices we're getting in our home for other purposes, just for entertainment and convenience purposes, we're going to find new applications. And so this is going to be, I think, a field for our community, an extraordinary opportunity to keep your eyes and ears open and to find through AIDEN a way to assure that we include communities of color as this goes forward, because the distribution of smartphones and the distribution of technologies is not even in our society either. And so we have to keep that front of mind, and we'll keep sexual orientation front of mind as well as we go through this. But I think this is extraordinarily exciting, but usually these technologies are emerging for a more general purpose of convenience or otherwise, or safety in the case of autonomous cars. But we have to be alert to the possibilities of how they can particularly serve our communities, and particularly communities of color. Just an observation.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing that's so important and that I know about this room, there are public and private partnerships going on throughout this room. We can't solve this alone. It's only going to happen together. And, you know, for instance, with our technologies, everybody in this room can connect through the app we have. It's free. We can partner with APIs. I'm listening around this room, and there are things that we all need to be doing together. We can't solve it alone. But don't sit there and think because you don't code and you don't have an app that you can't do it. Seniors will connect. People with a disease will connect. Caregivers are all connected, and we can change that isolation, which is completely profound, and that feeling that I have been left out of everything, my broken community, my broken family, but we can't do it alone. And so we offer up as partnership. You can always talk to us and have an app, and we should all be working together. And the data, we have to keep figuring out the studies we can do to prove that these small interventions are really meaningful in terms of saving your health care and everything else that we're trying to do. So thank you guys so much. This was a real pleasure. Thank you, George.